Kaya sa mga nakikipagsabwatan upang kunin ang pondo ng bayan at nakawin ang kinabukasan ng ating mga mamamayan, hiya naman kayo sa inyong kapwa Pilipino.
Ako po, hindi ko po masabi kung magkano po. Kasi para sa akin po, parang kami po ang nanakawan. Parang ibig sabihin, parang modern day na pagnanakaw. Ibig sabihin, yung nakaw ka, siya pa magbibigay ng pera dun sa ninakawan niya. Parang
nila na yung mga pirma ng mga congressman, unang-una hindi nila binasa yung articles of impeachment. Pangalawa, marami sa kanila ang tumanggap ng budget o pera kapalit ng kanilang signatures. In fact, madami sa kanila ang umamin na.
President Marcos Jr. took office in 2022, the Philippines has consistently become the brightest star in ASEAN, expanding among the fastest by 6.2%. Despite external challenges, we are expected to outperform ASEAN economies with a projected growth between 5.8 to 6.3% in 2020.
Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed by the host may not state or reflect those of peers and its members. Furthermore, the views and opinions made by the resource persons do not reflect those of the program, peers, and its members.
commodity prices, domestic market settings, and implementation capacity. And why I important for decision makers? Because there are risks more impact on the fiscal decisions. So let us first compare near-term growth and inflation signals and what's going well. And of course, remains contract and that's how it is. So these are the preview of different sectors like BSP, the World Bank, the IM, ADB, and of course our DB is all listed for the economic of the So for BSP, actually the rate about 4.6 or 5.7%. And we're back considering the growth rate uh, 2.8 to 3.6. And of course, we are going some figures about it. Now, we have also some figures about fiscal deficits. And again, we have to go into some of the peso exchange rate as fair basis for the DBs in making the injection target. Regulatory target. So let's go to after thinking on the figures, then let's look at what we expect in the near future. Number one is that domestic demand remains the main engine of our growth. This is, of course, brought about by the growth in income rate and also the easing of the interest rates. And that also that this is also a private consumption is fueled by remittances from our employees. Then you have also right side, the investment upside. However, that is still project really gain momentum and there will be some liberal reforms that will improve business environment. As you see, we have made it earlier, business confidence is very much a big factor in the growth of our future GDP. Then of course, we are going to have in services available opportunity. And we are seeing that this will be improvement in manufacturing, agriculture, and information technology, and well as stories. If there are these competitive yes, those services will be fees. And of course, on the labor force, I think they will have to is the prospect because it will be able to advance of this accommodating performance. But let us see what will go wrong. Okay. Number one, we as I said earlier, we confident enough can delay investment in public private agreement. And also there will be planning expertise risks and actually never been as you have already experienced there's our in terms of frequency and in terms of jobs are becoming stronger and if it happens then it will really hit agriculture very much and it will affect as a result it will affect the prices of food and infrastructure. So it would have again getting the impact, negative impact of inflation. And as far as the certain basic concern we are faced with about trade policy uncertainty, especially with President U.S. President Trump, the second economy, and also we have also to consider some geopolitical pressures, even within our near us, and of course, there are also need for some financial market correction. Now, all of these have an impact on these countries, and we have we could find that the possibility of slower revenue growth and which would, of course, would put spending factors and will be partially government also the fiscal regulations. Yeah. Okay, so these are the laws of equipment that we use of the country. So now we can see, of course, I guess declining, stabilizing, of course, and of course, the, uh, the public sector are expected to reduce the below 4% to even 5%. And of course, we still have little debt level. So for as long as we be able to pay our expenditures, and of course, there will be some efforts in regarding the collections in the area. So, but I'd like to emphasize that this is not a forecast that will be this is target. It's different when we say it's a forecast because there are certain factors that we expect to happen, but this is the target for the government as stated by development budget coordinating committee. And so here are three assumptions on the living system. First, the petrol is expected to be within the range of 56 per ton until 2028. And the current Dubai prices will be around 16 to 17, average of this to 25 to 28. And then our exports is expected to be 2%, then 2%, practically 2% by 26 by this year. Imports take up with probably we have positive here with domestic demand and price trading. And also however, the certain external movements that have to be done by multilateral agencies, and these are prolonged trade policy uncertainty and again geopolitical tensions of the world. And so it was stronger demand for exports. So in that case, we have problems in public in terms of export and imports. Okay, so now let's go to some of the factors here that we consider as part of the as we see in the future. In case of public investment and external influence, the likelihood is realized, and of course, if this happens, it also be very high. In the case of the climate, there is disaster risk of shocks as well as food prices, the impact medium to high, and the impact on the disaster risk will be very high. And in case of the critical there will be some surprises, as I have, and our expectation is to and also the medium as far as the impact is concerned. How about fiscal stability and concentration target, where we are confident that the likelihood to be about medium and the impact of the medium by in expectations. Okay, so the bottom line use that to be depend on the swing factors like climate change and budget execution and confidence that is coming down. And so, again, once we line for our outlook for 2026 to 2028, first, baseline points moderate growth with inflation inside target. So the target of the government is around 2 to 4%. It is within that range. And of course, resistance is partial across for past years. And that basically reflects uncertainty and different outcomes in different subjects. And here we will have as a matter of lookout, the biggest swing factors we are with we are going to expect. Number one, of course, confidence and business confidence in our country and the investment institution. Okay, the investment institution actually this includes investment on the part of the government, public sector investment, and this, we have noted last year there was a problem regarding the public sector investment here, and because of some governance issues and that need to be addressed. Okay, so these are part of that. And of course, I really hope that there will be we'll be able to adapt climate shots. Again, will in case there will be climate disaster. And by the way, as far as climate is concerned, we have to take note that we are number one most disaster prone country so we have to take note of that. And of course, if there will be crisis, there will be it will hit closure sectors and down to the value chain. That food prices will increase and it will have full pressure on our again, of course, our global trade. I think also to take note and we're just hoping our exporters will be able to adjust their outlook in order to address the reciprocal tariff imposed by the United States. And so we have also fiscal consideration, consolidated tax plan alongside primary spending. Again, we have to take note of the issues of the budget execution and of course, there is a need for some budget reforms and reviews. Of course, we are important in order to give them for all countries. And lastly, I think we have the policy priorities for confidence and governance issues public investment. We hope that public investment will work over this year and in other years and strengthen trade competitiveness of the climate change. And again, probably I have to add that we hope that there are certain factors that we have to consider, only especially because of the emergence of artificial intelligence impact on our BPOs, especially sectors, and also, of course, we hope that our own economy continue to bring the regular balances. Okay, I think that's all about the economic ties in all our economic for the future.
Thank you very much to Dr. Tony Abia for those very interesting points, very insights. So there was crunching of numbers that's the positive and the normative side of economics, explained to us in layman's terms by our peer chairman, Dr. Tony Abia. Now, one of the what you call this, controversial terms under the name of peers in the concept of elemental and research. So we try to blend that into something that could easily be understood by the public. But this morning, I'd like to give the floor to one of our peer members, the Executive Director of the Congressional Planning Office, to give us a more digestible, a more focused concept of elemental research. And this morning, we'd like to zero in on the low-hanging fruit policies and programs, not just only on the political side, but also more so on the economic side. That will include, of course, research data, analysis, and what have you, to be able to come up with a very good and solid concept of fundamental research as part of the new of peers. So we'd like to call on one of our peers, Mr. Nobel Gonzalez.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Magandang umaga sa lahat. As hello. Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. So again, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. My passion today focus more on ano yung reform dapat ipagtunan natin para makamit natin ang ating objectives, ang ating medium-to-long-term objectives na 6% growth. Tama po, yung sinasabi ko ni Sir Tony regarding yung economic performance and outlook, more or less, medyo suffered some setback in 2025 and more or less within part of your recovery eventually in the medium term. Of course, unless we do some corrective measures, we will not, or unless we are ating mga reform measures, I think we are confident, more or less confident, to say that we will be on track on the faster recovery. So, if you may, Andrea. So, sa susunod na slide. Okay, dahil dito na tayo. So, parang yun na natin, ang hindi sasabihin ko, we anchor from three main messages. One is about transparency and integrity. I think yung mga napag-analysis yung tawag kanina, but ang ito sabihin niya transparency and integrity is about restoring yung trust para may po yung investment both foreign and domestic. Medyo hindi po siya pumasok more or less kasi if you will see later on yung indicator of capital formation, medyo talaga tinamaan yung economy. So, transformation is very second in infrastructure resilience. Dito, we'll see talagang dapat shift from centralized bottlenecks to a diversified and accountable building program. So, as we will see later on, kita kasi natin yung nag-bottleneck last year, bakit nagkaroon na some pushback sa ating public sector spending, nagkaroon ng mga issues, structural issues with regards to yung ating pagproseso na public expenditure, public sector policies. So, transparency, infrastructure, yes, and only because of the draft, then that has public sector. Later on, nakikita na tumataas na din yung public sector spending natin, but in terms of the quality of spending, doon po natin politika saan nagkakaroon ng bottlenecks sa issue na yun. And third is the structural efficiency. Later on, makikita natin because of the four comes sinasabi natin ng mga critical and low fruits, makikita natin how this address issues of using utility and digital costs para ma-unlock natin yung local protection ng mga sectors like industry and service sector. So, ito po ang framing ng ating discussion today that will be anchored in streaming, transparency, integrity, infrastructure resilience, and yung pangatlo, structural efficiency. So, bago sa lahat, before we have this headline papers, so more or less, natin ito, isang quick look sa headline figures na to. While nagkaroon ng slowdown sa mga pinaka-indicators na to, yung discussion natin more or less focus on specific governance shifts na nag-cause ng slowdown and how through an legislative framework that is being set into motion will be able to hopefully put us back to a 6% growth trajectory. So, tinignan po natin ito ng mga datos na ito. Very quickly, makikita mo na while it's a mix of resilience as well as of concern. So, una muna, ano yung mga indicators that more or less cases suffered in concern? Well, of course, I could now mention that in Mr. Robin, if you look at full-year growth in 2025, I think ano na ito, nakapag-usapan na ito sometime. But if you look at it, 4.4% in 2025, ang ibig sabihin, this is so far as the West since 2011. Slowest since 2011. And pag titignan nyo naman latest quarter ng 2025, which is at 3% is also the weakest in post-pandemic quarter since I think 2014. So, these are the more or less concerned. But sabi ko pa, this is a business case and concern. If we look at indicators for interest rate, so more or less makikita ko naman yung proactiveness ng BSP managing interest rate regime, so more or less February 19, nagkaroon po na reduction in price rate ng 5 basis points. So at 4.25%, this is more or less a measure way of BSP starting borrowing in the economy. At the same time, I think I mentioned that ito kanina, of course, yung ating reliant on new remittances, surprisingly reach a record high in the last recent years, 5.6 billion. So that is a 2.3% year-on-year increase. Again, while this is still indicators, and also another point is that compared to the ASEAN, other ASEAN countries, nasa one of the fastest growing economy. I think from the second to Vietnam, which able to get a positive, more than higher than 6% growth. But regardless of this growth performance, economic indicators, still we are still performing below our potential of 6% local economic growth. So again, we are still performing below our potential dahil ating full year growth 4.4% 4.4%, still below the 6% that is supposed to be yung ating potential, assuming that all things will go, all things will go in this space. Ideally, yun po dapat ang ating makakamit na economic growth na 6%. But also other things, inflation at 2% is still within yung BSP target of 2 to 4%. We have to understand that yung relative price increases over the last 5 years has eroded the purchasing power of the Filipinos by 25 to 30%. So again, that simply yung purchasing power ng kababayan natin for the last 5 years has been reduced by as much as 25 to 30%. So, doesn't make a difference. Yung value na ngayon 5 years ago, it's no longer the same as the value of the peso now, which has reduced value of 25 to 30%. So, siguro sa next slide, mas makikita natin siguro ano ba, bakit tayo umabot sa ganitong sitwasyon? Ano ba yung nagpapala ng ating paglago ng ating ekonomiya noong 2025? So, again, as I said, yung fourth quarter ng 2025 growth ng 3% is the weakest non-pandemic quarter, in 40 years. So, again, just by comparing again yung ABC target, na rin Tony, kung hindi po natin for the consecutive year. It's also important to note that itong bagay ang pag-angat ng ekonomiya is not a global trend. Hindi po ito isang global factor that is affecting our economies. But more also, it is a domestic structural challenge that has been triggered by infrastructure spending costs following significant governance issues. So we'll get to that more in the later slides. So, kung titignan po natin itong chart na to, which is basically a GDP decomposition, looking at an expenditure approach. So, makikita po natin yung, of course, household consumption is still the backbone of our economy. Although medyo bumagal sa konti dahil sa weakening ng labor market. But I'm very concerned dito sa ito kung makikita nyo lang sa slide is yung pagbagsak ng gross capital formation ng 8.9%. So, nag-track po yung capital formation for quarter. So essentially, tells you that investment, which is the engine of your future growth, was due to corruption-related things on public works. So makikita po natin that ang very essential component of economy, which is investment, and well, it drastically dropped by 10%, more than 20%. So that gives you an idea ano po ang nag-drive ng contraction sa ating ekonomiya. So again, it's not about global factor, but more like governance, need yung ng ating program potential to set. So, doon tayo sa susunod na so more or less, nakita na natin pag di-compose natin yung mga components ng ekonomiya, ito naman, ang kanila, ito naman, ulitin natin yung composition ng ating ekonomiya by production sectoral approach. So, sinasabi ko dito, we are walking with one leg because you can see, not surprisingly, again, I mentioned natin to, it's not always been the service sector that has been the driving force of our economy. So, tingnan ko natin dito sa, more or less, I think it's the blue bar. So, makikita mo, medyo consistent, medyo stable ng services sector, especially and in particular being led by finance and ating BPO sectors. But later on, siguro, parang raise of concern with regards to yung ating prospects sa BPO especially. But pag natin sa industry, again, going back sa ating sinasabi of walking with the leg, where service sector has been more or less stable, ang industry sector naman contracted by about 1% in the fourth quarter. So, itong industrial edge, which was caused by mining and construction sectors, turning negative, directly tied in the pause in the government infrastructure disbursements. So, again, on the issue of the service sector, while it has been shown that it has been growing on a steady track, but many are raising concern about the prospects of the service sector, especially with the rise of the artificial intelligence. Many are saying with the increasing rise of artificial intelligence, most likely the sector that will be affected by this is the service sector. However, ang service sector natin ngayon has been in terms of employment generation, generating about 1.5 million jobs, contributing about 30 to 35 billion dollars. So you just have to imagine the effect of AI in the service sector. If in case this will lead to reduction of growth in the BPO sector, marami po sa ating Filipino workers will be affected. Of course, yung other related industries that also rely on the BPO sector will also be affected. The sector, say, in rentals, space rentals, so in the food sector, so lahat po yan will be affected if yung ating if the growing concern for AI will be impact on the growth of the BPO sector. Siguro, Andrea, so again, working with context, so hopefully that will raise some concern on that particular issue. So I took earlier, what we're seeing is that in the near term, more or less, we can say with confidence that we will contract doon sa ating 5.5% growth trajectory in 2026, and more or less 2027, we will be growing a lot faster from 5.5 to 6%. As again, projected by yung mga various sectoral multilateral institutions. Again, this growth is subject to the commission. Yung mga reforms na i-discuss ko in the next slide will be met. So again, subject to the commission, the reforms we are setting motion will be achieved either in the next coming years. So, siguro looking at ano ba ito mga policy measures that are being set in motion. So, Andrea, okay, as saying, hindi naman masasabi na the government is not doing anything. In fact, based sa legal priorities that we recently nabasa so far as yung mga updates sa mga priority measures are concerned. So you can see here that a number of measures have already been enacted. So most notable dito is yung new Government Procurement Act. So this is very critical, especially in the governance area, because with this measure, it will be able to fix the transparency that is led to 22% of public construction spending. So again, doon kami sa unang message na sinasabi ko on transparency and integrity. So, very simple po itong measure ito because it's able to fix or provide solution doon sa transparency ka. And with this measure, hopefully sa nangyari doon sa ating sort of missteps in the infrastructure, public infrastructure sector. We also have accelerated play again for the infrastructure area. It reduces the ways to speed flagship projects. So, and of course, yung final tax reform, which is the focus on focus na specifically is generates additional to fund infrastructure catch-up programs. So, in all, I think by 2026, the government is expected to pass around 50 to 17 critical bills. So some of these measures, again, ito na yung mga ibang na measures kasi it's already been passed into law. Currently, the motion of the implemented, but there are also other measures like yung Implemented People's Commission Act, which will provide that oversight needed to prevent scandals. Siguro Andrea, yung natin. So again, these are measures that intends to address yung these steps natin in 2025. So as you can see here, itong mga priority bill na to, which were identified in the priority measures. So you have the People's Commission Act, you have the Pagtaya Act, you have the Classroom Building Restoration Act. So also IPIRA amendments, and as well as the rights certification law amendments. Again, to brief, actualize what structures intend to do, basically to reduce regulatory and digital costs that will allow to unlock the potential of the industry sectors like in power, also in other social sectors like education. So let me just go back to address siguro sa previous slide. Ayan. Meron na kasi doon yung 42% collapse in public construction spending. Ano lang, bigyan ko lang ng topic kung oras to discussion na to. Kasi very important na malaman natin how this 42% collapse in public construction happened. So, basically, it is the concern that emanated from accessibility gap. So, in production, in flood control projects, it's already been discussed over again, wasn't just a legal figure, but also a fiscal failure where public money lacked proof oversight. I think mentioned that earlier in the first presentation that there is it is essential that transparency and integrity should be measured on transparency and integrity should be implemented uh, as soon as possible para the trust in the way spend public resources. That, of course, will also in turn optimism in investment will happen. And kung medyo ilalalim ng pag-approach ng discussion na to, of course, we also have issues of the way we use and program operations. So I think the government has been doing its share to minimize the size of program operations and mechanisms in place so that we will be able to manage the size of program operations because in the past, this has made individual reasons that has led to the contraction in cost capital formation as the budget and the possibility to pivot to alternative as public projects quickly. And related to that, it's also yung fragmentation of earmarked revenues because large of infrastructure funds because of this earmark policy were trapped in efficient earmark could have easily been allocated to more productive and high quality sectors. So I think overall, pabalikin ako doon three main messages ko kanina. And as we go through these reform measures, critical relying programs and projects, it is important that at the end of the day, these measures you have to address three items. One, policy and integrity. Two, infrastructure research. And three, structural efficiency. So all these once addressed these critical measures will be able to bring back to the path of economic recovery of 6% growth. So on that note, salamat po. Maraming salamat at magandang umaga sa inyo lahat.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nobel. Very informative, very extensive discussion on the policy regime and existing legislative efforts that are being worked on to ensure that the critical reforms are translated into actual policies and programs. So we now go to the part of the meat and juice of our discussion this morning, because mainly Here's in Tao is about discussing key political issues of the day. And all throughout the 99 episodes that have passed on Here's in Tao, we have discussed the country's political landscape, both internal and external. And Being part of those discussions, we have identified those internal and external threats within our political landscape. So to talk about the political landscape, internal and external threats that confront us, we have with us this morning the President and CEO of Peers, Professor Edmond Pagtaya.
Good morning, everyone. Uh, we're proud to welcome you to our 100 episode in the Pearson Town. When we started in 2024, we were really trying to figure a way to offer an alternative discussion, alternative information, and obviously alternative analysis of the prevailing situations. We are aware of the changing environment, and there is very much need to address and address and adjust. That's the right term to use, address the new challenges and circumstances. And so I prepared short presentation for you, and I thought of explaining the character of politics. We're waiting for the slides to finally show up. Anyway, a little presentation is a simula.
Ayan, ikaw na. Asan yun?
When we say politics simula, it's a philosophical term, but it essentially encapsulates the kind of politics that we have today. The simulacra is that we're clear, and I'm sure for us many would be able to identify what is this time. Let's go to the next slide. We are at the crossroads mainly because of the kind of politics that we face. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So if we look at it's the representations or imitations or substitutes of the substitutes without an original or a fake information. Popularized by Jean Baudrillard's represent symbols that replace reality with a hyper real moving from faithful values to images that have no real reference. So in other words, we have shifted from imitating to replacing the imitation or the virtual. So we have shifted from faithful copies to replacing reality with imitation. We're confusing virtual reality from reality itself. The implication, of course, is far-reaching as it plays right into the heart of information, which is fundamental for us making decisions, especially for governments formulating policies and programs, and for people making sense of day-to-day problems and determining the best practice in each space. If we are not able to distinguish real from what is fake, then it impacts directly on the way we view things. And when it affects the way we view things, it therefore goes without saying that it also affects our decision-making processes. The result often is confusion. And worse, what's really happening now, division. Alam niyo, sa social media na lang, I've always been commenting on the news reports. And more often, I have to grapple with the reality. And even some closest friends mentioned, they have become subject to this belief, you know, as those which are actually based only on what is popular. No? In other words, yung kanilang analytical and objective perspective to the point that they have become subject to the same beliefs as many that are actually anchored on anchored on simulacra. They have become believers of something that actually do not exist. Okay? So, sa madaling sabi, naloloko tayo ng mga bagay na hindi dapat natin tinitignan at hindi natin dapat kino-consider. No? The result is confusion and division, especially in a country where the government is inferior and vulnerable to any form of act, physical or virtual. The dilemma is choosing the right leader or group of leaders that can actually navigate the new world and at the same time achieving development, which sadly we're still trying to reach. You know, the dilemma here that we are faced with this clear and present challenges, but at the same time we're playing catch up. We have yet to develop as a country compared to many of our neighbors, but at the same time we have to face this different reality. The same reality that is faced by other countries, including supposedly powerful countries like the United States of America. Yes, including China. And many, of course, of our Western friends, no? From Germany to France to the rest of Europe. And of course, Japan, South Korea, and India. So, next slide. If we therefore look at the challenge ahead, babalik tayo doon sa problema ng weak state, which is discussed by our economic experts much earlier. If there's any reason why there is a slowdown in development, if there's any slowdown in growth, it is mainly explained by the weakness of our state, by the weakness of our government. You know, our politics are okay. Kaya nga yung kata namin na nadadaan lang tayo sa budo, nadadaan lang tayo sa China. At yung mga tumatakbo pa, kaya nilang buwan, plano nila, kung sila nahala, ang isasagot nila sa ito, pinag-iisipan pa nila o ibabalik sa ito yung tanong. No? We choose on the basis of personalities and not programs or positions or issues. If you care to ask any candidate, any person who offered him or herself to run for office, ask him or her on key issues. And I'm sure the answer will either be any promises or nothing. No? In other words, it's possible that they avoid important issues, including issues about China, no? Which clearly is important with this challenge that we now face. And we will tell you more about that. Have you heard of this UFWD, for example, which we will still discuss with you as we go along. We're still wanting to determine, for example, what kind of strategy China is using against us. They know I mentioned already, and I'm giving you an idea as to what we found out in years. Try to figure out what UFW means. You will be able to piece together the initiatives of China, not only in the Philippines, but in many countries around the world. The government structure is therefore weakened, with key institutions not enjoying the people's support. In other words, the result of you not being people to choose the right leaders. Ends up with a government that is run by people who are not capable of running the government. Okay? For example, if before we have a Supreme Court that has been virtually free from partisanship. Today we have a Supreme Court that has become part of the political milieu, part of the political discussion, and of course, part of partisanship. If you are going to look at the Supreme Court decisions, many of our legal analysts have expressed reservations with many of those decisions, particularly with the case. And it's the first time in history that our legal luminaries are practically saying the same exact observation. And the answer to us is that basically they're not the ones that we should be listening to because they're no longer in the Supreme Court. Mind you, it's not only the former or the retired justices of the Supreme Court that have been expressing reservations, decisions of the Supreme Court, but also scholars, recognized scholars, no, in the country. And this is the first time that this is happening. Now, some people say, no, what happens really is what the Supreme Court has already said, being the current Supreme Court. Yeah, but have you noticed that even the Supreme Court also requires or depends on the opinions of what they call amicus curiae or friends of the court. And the friends of the court, whether you like it or not, are the people who recognize that we're talking about. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is if it is not the executive department and the legislative department that has been subject to partisanship and ultimately also suffered disbelief on the part of the public. Now, even the Supreme Court has become fairly, in other words, has become subject to criticism. And this will keep on happening if we keep on electing the wrong people. Imagine if we have an executive in a legislature that enjoys significant public support, regardless of whether there will be this disagreement between the key individuals or the key branches of government. There's always an opportunity for any and all department to express a different take on the same. Pero halos pareho sa atin na sa politika this criticism. No? The government is fragmented. You know, if you want to be dealing with key issues like agriculture, manufacturing, what our experts are discussing for Allah, you have to go to different agencies, put together the data or information for you to be able to actually make sense of the whole scenario. No? We have a problem when it comes to data management, data and information. Not to mention, again, that we've been talking about political dynasty, for example, but the number one challenge of political dynasty is the fragmented local government with very small local governments. Our municipalities have always been repeating this over and over again. Our municipalities are only as big as villages in other countries. You just have to compare the Philippines with our neighbor Indonesia, for example. We have 82 provinces, we just imagine that. And there are still some proposals to even create more provinces and divide these ones. Now, if you look at Indonesia, Indonesia only has 13 provinces. But what makes this a big difference? It's a big difference because Indonesia has 6 times the size of the Philippines. The Philippines is only 15.4% of the total land area of Indonesia. Why does this matter? This matters because when it comes to policy making, when it comes to policy implementation, as simple as traffic management and waste management, the economies of scale matter. And the economies of scale depends significantly on the size of jurisdiction. What does this have to do with political dynasty? It would be difficult to address political dynasty if your constituencies remain this small. Because the smaller the constituency, the smaller the number of players that would like to go for themselves as alternative leaders, in the different communities. In other words, people will always be working on it. Even if they're not happy with the government, they can just have and do something about it. How many positions all heads have we had? I'm sure you still remember one time, big time call for rally. And just recently, there is another call that supposedly it has become part of with this dilemma that we're about to celebrate the 40th year of people power anniversary. But now the question is, will the people still consider the streets as an alternative to formal institutional ways that address issues, particularly in terms of political? The answer to this is that is because of previous experience, precisely because of NSAS 1 and 2, we have learned significantly from history. And learning so much from history means that we have to consider what's in it for us. Second, what's the alternative? Have we forgotten what happened in the NSAS 2, for example, when we replaced a sitting president who was supposedly a better president, but the result is not really the same, and not really different or just. In other words, we are going to replace the current president, and the one who's going to take over as vice president. The question now is if this is acceptable to many of us. And the answer to this is that we not allow to individually by every Filipino, but simply by reflecting at the result of the many call for public protest and demonstration. So the very structure of the whole country is moving along. We're not only talking about the roads and bridges. We're talking about telecommunications infrastructure. We're talking about practically all the infrastructures, all the infrastructure all over the country. Did you know that we were vulnerable? Every phone call, every message exchange, every email exchange will always be subject to interested parties listening in you or wanting to get your information. It's called the matter of politics also because the coming of artificial intelligence allows practically anyone to get much needed information as far as every individual is concerned. Not only information, but also a very security feature that is your face, your camera, and many other assets of your existence can be generated by artificial information. And the absence of a secure infrastructure is a significant challenge. The result is government acting without realizing it is not on its own, but actually controlled by something or someone else. So this is the reality we're facing. Not only that, but from the longest So what are the options available? Perhaps the option is to choose the right thing. No? Choose the right thing which we go to the next election. And we seem to be starting the election early. But we have to realize that we're not a disruptive situation. But without us reflecting significantly on the situation, any disruptive situation is actually an opportunity for us to regenerate, to restart, and to refresh. Look at the figure. The one that the early power is only at 30%. You see that, that's 30%. The third makes a formal political plan, but it has not been as it was before. If you remember the percentage votes that the vice president hired in 2022, if you remember the public approval ratings up to 2023, at the very least, you will be surprised that numbers go as high as 70 to 80%. So the 30%, while remaining a significant number compared to the other alternatives, is significantly smaller than before. And we're not sure if this 30% will remain 2 years from now. Having to yourself why the group of the president has been wanting to take over the presidency since 2 years ago, precisely because there is no assurance that 2028 will go there. There's no way by any person, even a clairvoyant, for that matter, who be able to say that with definitive was this perspective that the result of 2028 will be as such. The question is, why does the presidency remain strong? It remains strong because of one, political machinery, and two, significant support from non-traditional sources. So the question is, this is not traditional sources. And I mentioned already was this a earlier? Have you heard of UFW? Perhaps you want to start searching what UFW is and find out whether it significantly affected our politics, whether it significantly affected how people view discussing key issues, not only in the social media but also in the real world. Meanwhile, there is not about this very early declaration, but any political observer would know that reflecting on what happened before is significant to hello? Is significant to any analysis. I remember the session with there's always someone who's going to debate with me. And there seemed to want to question who am I to insist on my perspective. And I thought I didn't have to engage anyone questioning what I say and insist that his opinion is not better. Actually, we're so way by which one can say one opinion is better than the other. Except that one will always have experience of probably the background for understanding what anything is being discussed. Ang problema sa Pilipinas is merong nararamdaman, merong influence sa Pilipinas, kaya lahat ang iniisip kahit na sinasabi ko yung mag-comment ko pagdating sa Pilipinas. Totoo naman yun. Yun lang, merong din tao na talagang ginagawa nila hindi ang politika, at ito ang kanilang profesyon. So siguro, parang walang pinagpayan na kapag ikaw ay masakit ng ibig, hindi ka pupunta sa engineer, pupunta ka sa dentista. At ganoon din kung kapapagawa ng pakay, hindi ka pupunta sa abogado. Ang pupunta mo ang elektriko at saka engineer. Pero, yun ang politika dahil lahat tayo ay sali at involved sa politika, hindi na natin maiisip na mayroong mga tao na talagang yun lang nilang inaarap. At binanggit ko ito kasi kapag natin natin, the one that is reference for analyzing politics is to look back at how things have been. In other words, we are going to, if we're going to try and figure out what's the, what are the chances of this early declarations of vice president, we can only use as reference early declarations of previous leaders. From the late Speaker Jose de Reynosa, former Senator Villar, former Vice President Binay, and Secretary Robles, they all declared earlier that all the other contenders can be handled. In other words, there's still so much that will happen 2 years from now. But of course, the supporters of the Vice President will always say they are out to make history. So let's find out whether that's actually going to happen. Because when we say early declaration, it can be an advantage, no? But only if critical issues are addressed. And what are the critical issues? Would everyone actually believe that the Vice President and the name of their baby is free from corruption, which is much being discussed today? They have not been able to answer any and all allegations that have been thrown at them. All they state is that they are involved in corruption and that their political opponents are the ones guilty of corruption. The Vice President, anyone in their group, not one of the senators who are identified with the Vice President are now branded so-called chinadors or chinadors. The reason is that all their decisions and all their pronouncements have been very much in favor of China. And the Vice President no less has been asked a number of times, several times, about her comments on the West Philippine Sea, her comments on Chinese espionage. Mind you, just very quickly, another sleeper hit in Oslo, in Zambales, and before that, was in people, Chinese people is preventing the Filipinos and living homeless. Pogo, among others, Parliament, and many other including the only administration in the world probably that appointed a foreigner to be part of the cabinet. Not one of these issues have been answered by the Vice President. And why does this have to be answered? We have to look at issues that the people are very much interested to look into. Poverty is the top issue. But when we see economic development, it is very much dependent on so many other issues. Poverty remains a top issue, because economic development remains the primary issue. What many people understand is with all the issues already happening, the people have also become aware of what matters as far as economic development is concerned. And this is precisely why we discuss economic issues first. Okay? The main challenge as far as economic development is actually political. Actually political and actually the limitations as far as the government, the state is concern. If we look at issues that are resonating to the public, as reflected in many surveys, corruption is not only an issue, no? Seen by many as fundamental to addressing poverty. In other words, the way that people understand poverty and economic development is no longer as easy as before. They are not able to understand poverty on the basis of challenges in government and most importantly, corruption. But another issue that might interest everyone, which has been reflected in many surveys before, is that child-related issues have become one, if not the top concern next to poverty. Again, observation there is not as important. We go with the observation conducted. People understand that China is not just an issue in international business, but China has impact on the daily issues that we now face. In other words, we can no longer expect the people to follow the lead and not be as careful with the issues that they face today. And so, I will end my discussion by saying that information is key. And this is the reason why we are parents intend to serve the public by facilitating reliable information. No? We will demonstrate to you that we will not only be offering you periodic economic forecasts, relevant analysis of key issues today, but at the same time also offer you alternative approaches to the key issues. Before that, we like to introduce to you one of our one of our experts in peers, no less than a lawyer himself. He's known on social media as the Pinoy state lawyer. Before we show you what Philips is capable of doing in terms of crunching with that, let me welcome Attorney Victor.
Thank you very much for the very enlightening speech. Just a reaction the matters that have been so far discussed. I think on the grounds sa laylayan ng lipunan, dapat nang indihan ng mga mapaparticipate in the next election. Ang kahalagahan information, hindi emosyon. Because and I think I congratulate peers for doing this job because this is information based. And I think beyond the election, really the fight against misinformation, uninformation, and disinformation is very important because ultimately it will result in education. So maraming salamat po. At ako bilang abogado, hindi kami ebidensya hindi po salamat.
Now, we give you our daily expert, Nico Tala, to explain to you our input to generate and analyze data, not only in social media, but across all the different platforms and venues. We show you that this is not only a local film, but we will cooperate in working closely with other international films in this system.
It's a pleasure. So thank you. This will be a very short demonstration of basically what the everything have partners, not just in the Philippines, but also season. One of the things that we would like to highlight is the ability to show how information is shared across different types of media. As we all know, this type of information is quite prevalent in the world we have today, in terms of how you share information, regardless if it's
through social media, regardless of mainstream news or something, how we consume information has now become a very, very significant thing in how we source and how we analyze things. For example, certain amount of abilities, that's for example, the economy, for example, how people talk about their politicians, what are the pressing issues that we have today. It's a very digital thing that we must grapple with concerning how we go about daily life. Without further ado, we the ability for us to basically show how different dimensions are shown. As there's one, for example, if the news outlet shows an article. So I have here basically in front of us the tool, and it's showing us metrics for different, let's say, media mentions, media comments on YouTube posts, Facebook posts. When someone goes live, when someone doesn't go online, the age, where these posts are coming from, the country, which is very important to highlight, as well as the reach associated with these media mentions, and also the virality. You could have a very large reach on a certain post, but it could never go viral. You could have posts that would perhaps go viral, but it doesn't have a lot of reach. So it's a very organic thing. So for example, I want to highlight issues regarding Philippines. This is not just Philippine information we have here in front of us, it's international. So for example, here we have a post in the UK. The senator calls out China. The reach associated, as you can see in front of our screens, is quite significant. The tool also shows us the age ranges that these people usually, the people that usually consume this type of media, or for example, for this particular content, as we see, people who are from 5 to 54 years old, right around 20%, and so on, so forth. You can even filter for sex, male, females, as we see, it's almost a 50-50 split. So basically, what I'm trying to show here, and so let's do another one. Basically, yes, men, Philippine bars, that's Philippines individuals. Furthermore, lawyers, Philippine C, Chinese worship, Ariella, there's live shows, a senator. What I'm trying to say is the way we consume media today is completely different from how we consume media 500 years ago. It's become so organic. So let's go further. Let's say I want to, by the way, this is the past day, and the firm has to be able to go further. So 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, even the last 24 hours. And the reason why this is significant is because the pace that we consume information today is so fast that, let's say, one day is considered a day in terms of how information goes around. So let's say for 24 hours, if we go to the internet operates. So for the past 24 hours, I have 110 hits. These are filtered by reach. 4 issue of the West Philippines. And this is, we have the capability of tracking not just the West Philippines, but also other issues. So, for example, the Vice President declaring her wish to run for the presidency. We can track for personality. This is public information that basically anyone can find for themselves. The only difference is we are kind of highlighted. So again, here, Perasa Island, Monteveros, Mariela, and more. But what I also want to show is there's a specific way of showing exactly how media is repressed, not just by media mentions or by age or really by country, but also by media settings. So this is the last 64 hours, and again, filtered for
issues on the West Philippines is we can see on the left hand corner we have views by the web, YouTube, comments, etc. This is requested by so we see here on the left is February 20 at 6. Let's say at 600 hours, 300 hours, midnight, 100 hours. What I'm trying to say is this is all math. Each of these represents dimensions of any sign and when they were posted, if they have connections to something else. So I'll look like this one, for example, on YouTube. There's, as we can see, there's voting levels, how they're connected to another media segment, etc. And this is relevant because if we span out, so now I'm going to go from 24 hours, let's say 7 days. It basically shows where the discourse is at any particular time, any particular date, with any particular issue. How we, again, the connectivity takes us off, agrees with us. It's important to show where these conversations are coming from. So this is now showing us in the past 7 days. This is not a pre-week presentation. This is completely organic. This is how it looks right now. So as we can see, the last 7 days, there are great connections between YouTube, comments. We have much more experience on YouTube and web on issues that we can see. Let's say I click on this one. Again, granted, I did not make this beforehand. We see issues for news articles, YouTube. Also, there's URLs on the right. This is relevant. It shows us what people are actually looking at. So, see if they have how strong their reach is. News, for example, we have here, the Maryland, Congress Umbrella, thanks, Senator Pelos, Senator, you can see what are the issues with West Philippines, etc., etc. Now, the reason why, so as the so what I'm trying to say is all of the presentations so far today kind of highlight that how we crunch numbers, how we do presentation, how we understand other things throughout media. It's incredibly relevant to us because when, let's say, big decisions start to take place at the election, how we deal with politics or how we think about politics, we have to kind of understand that this is how we're thinking about it and how that's us. And it's been an incredible thing to kind of show the that we have on the thing. So perhaps I can call back the moderator.
Thank you, Nico, and thank you to our distinguished resource persons for years. So we'd like to call on the 4 gentlemen to please sit here in front. You just have to ask our assistant, please. Yeah. So we're doing this live. So you have to pardon us. Anyway, we're trying to encapsulate these discussions by getting feedback from our 4 resource persons. We'd like to call back Sir Tony, Sir Nobel, Prof. Ed, and then Nico. Okay, we have some this very timely questions. No? Although in this part of the program, coming on stage, there's what we call in the next 2 days the 40th anniversary, as mentioned earlier by Professor Ted. We will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the People Power Revolution, and we have spoken on the political landscape, the economic landscape, the environmental research insights, and the strategy that we are employing here to meet the monitoring. So perhaps if you can just help our viewers gain a perspective on, for example, on the economy, has there been a real fundamental economic change from 1986 to 2026? Perhaps we all know the answer, but for the benefit of our viewers, certainly can you just take us through the salient points of those changes, and if those changes were in fact for the benefit of foreigners.
Hindi, ipapanig ko nga kayo. Pwede mo pa
Okay, thank you, Aaron, for that question.
Hindi,
Yeah, I think there are some changes since we had people power revolution in 1986. Of course, we number one is the fact that we have a new constitution. It's the 1987 constitution. And there were also a lot of reforms like liberalization of the time of President Ramos. And of course, there are also some, we also experienced some in terms of economic growth. But the only issue here is that we remain the driver for is the services sector. Okay, and I think there should be higher productivity in agriculture and also in manufacturing, and probably there will be some bright sides when we apply some IT and so on. So I think there is also some improvement, but again, all these improvements are not sustainable in the long term. Why? It is because of the fact that again, we are number one is our growth is driven by private consumption. Private consumption, which of course is good. You have no interest rate and you have the easing of the interest rate, as well as the remittances of our OFW, which keeps on growing from 35 billion to 35 billion. So, others. So, however, we have to address this again as far as our balance of trade is concerned, meaning we have to export more in order to get others in order to pay for our import. So, in fairness, we have, again, is it sustainable? I think we have really there is a need for our sectors. And probably you guys here is if we can concentrate on developing our agriculture, then that would be a good move on the part of the government.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Tony. Thank you, Sir Tony. Now, another interesting discussion point that has been going around in social media are the critical political reforms that have now been included as part of the President's priority agenda. And perhaps Sir Noble can help us shed light on these reforms and what are the real chances of these reforms passing through the current composition of our legislature, like the anti-political dynasty bill, and you also have, I don't think it was part of the priorities, but the Political Party Reform and Development Act has long been discussed. So could you help share some insights, Sir Noble, on the reality that these bills will be passed in the current Congress?
Thank you, Ron. I think yung mga measures, most of them that I presented, I think those are the measures that this administration is targeting to pass by June of 2026. So I think it's a good signal that there is intent in the administration to push for measures that again is main message of improving transparency and integrity. I think it's a painful and learning experience and lesson. What happened in 2025? I think issue of infrastructure projects, I think some of the measures are now set in motion. Like I mentioned, may mga measures na may masabi, yung implement app, yung integrated infrastructure commission, itong kadena which more or less utilize blockchain technology where you will be able to track yung how public resources are being used, utilized. So from proposal to actual spending to this approach, you will be able to follow, follow the monitoring. So I think those are the measures or the policies that I think were missing previously. So, nagkaroon ng let's say for example, Pito lesson, I think what happened last year, ma-realize that it's no longer increasing national government budget for public spending, but it's not a question of quality expenditures. I think that's really the advocacy, especially from the perspective. Kasi pag sinabi mo ating efficiency, operational efficiency, discipline. So unless all of these principles objectives are met, sabi na lang, it's not a matter of the science, but how you spend the budget. Kaya mapapansin natin that no matter how big yung ating government spending is, but in terms of yung value again, yung tinatawag nila na multiplier effect. In fact, from our end, we know for every peso spent, based on the way we spend money, alam naman natin less than the amount of peso spent, hindi mabalik sa bayan. So what we do here is, of course, improve on this multiplier effect. So no matter the size of the national government budget is, as long as we will implement it effectively, efficiently, we are assured that the multiplier effect will be much larger than the amount of money that we are spending. So again, from a public management perspective, it is very essential that we spend on our public resources wisely and effectively. So I think you should be the driving message that we want from my end to impact our teams.
Sir Noel, you mentioned yung budgeting or also in terms of one spending, considering in the past years, yung question yung absorbing capacity ng iba natin yung agencies, no? And despite the big numbers. But perhaps now we into the political side, no? So just before I ask for Ed's insights, no? There were two political events that happened over the past few days, no? One is the declaration of Vice President Sara Duterte's intention to run for the presidency. And second, the meetup of the former political host, President Bongbong Marcos and Mayor Benito Robredo in Naga City. And as we approach the 40th year of EDSA, marami nagsasabi na there is the potential unification of the pink slash yellow courses and also the reds or the Marcos 7. Considering the fact na pagdating tayo sa 40th anniversary ng EDSA, very unlikely na kung babalikan natin ng taon na nakaraan, very unlikely na mapagsasama mo sa isang pangungusap na magkakamping yung mga reds at saka yung mga yellows. Plus the fact mo na mayroong na-perceive mga kababayan ng common threat or common enemy sa kanila. So ipasok ko lang sa internal and external threats because we all know that the Dutertes have been so-called allied or synonymously mentioned in the same sentence to China. So we're just like to get thoughts on this, on the possible unification of the reds and the yellows in the midst of both internal and external threats.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have to make the best for finally settling the age-old political rivalry between the Marcoses and Aquinos. But we shouldn't just limit it to that rather simplistic narrative. That's, there's a unification between the two competing forces. But also there is a transformation of political awareness, actually, because it's no longer limited to the usual choices. Because the usual choices were either Marcos or Aquino or Duterte ka. But now it would seem that the people have learned significantly from how things are begun. And my reason, basis for that, again, is the reaction of the people whenever they're asked to go to EDSA, ask for the streets, and go for the designation. The people become more sophisticated when it comes to understanding politics and issues. So again, it's no longer limited to personalities. They are now aware that so much depends on the kind of decision making that they will do, particularly in the next coming election. Nakita na natin yung sinandala, for example. I remember quite vividly the kind of Senate we had, the likes of Merian Defense, Joey Salon, Berto Tanya, and many others. And if you know that, no history will tell us people like Jose Moto have, not only graced the Senate, but has also been named for the Senate and for themselves as individual states. No? I don't think we can compare the current Senate to the kind of Senate we have some 10, 20, some 20 years back. And the people are aware with the issues that we have faced with corruption, control corruption, with how we're dealing with CBC, with how we're dealing with infrastructure, the underdevelopment, and so on and so forth. The people are now more aware that the kind of choice that they will make matters significantly. And I'm quite certain and confident that the way they are going to make the political choices would be different. Not only because the Latinos and the Marcos are coming to the unified force, but this is consistent with the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No? So there is a conversion that's happening, mainly because the way to address the kind of issues we face today is to have a unified approach. But more than that, again, the people are aware that make better choices. So how the Polish University will be celebrated is mainly to be measured by the number of people who will vote against it, but also by the narrative that will be generated as a result. And again, it's not related how things we've always been seeing and how we've always been dealing with issues, but also how best we can transform our individual selves into much more objective and substantive participants of the country.
Thank you, Prof. I think we covered a lot of ground this morning. We would like to give resource persons, starting with Nico, the opportunity to give their final statements. No? Just to put everything into context, no, we've been talking about this whole set of economic data, policy initiatives, describing the political landscape, but it all boils down at the end of the day to what kind of reforms needs to be implemented, needs to be put into policy or program, or maybe constitutional reform. Perhaps we're free to discuss what kinds of reforms does the country require so that we can move past all these underperformance in the economy. We can ask for what is substantive and legislation that responds to the needs of the people. So just take us through from your lens. Let's start with Nico. Based on the realities on social media, based on artificial intelligence, based on our digital lives, what kind of reforms are necessary so that we can keep up with the times in terms of our legislative body of work or the executive body of work? So let's start with Nico and let's end with Prof. And as a final statement for each of the resource persons.
Nothing for the final statement. If you allow me to take off from what the good professor said a while ago on specifically, perhaps the appetite on who the people want to speak, maybe elected into office, maybe elected into the big office in Manila. But what I'd like to say is, I get to monitor media every single day throughout various media platforms, and every now and then I see interesting things. So a few days ago, I basically saw this post from, I'll say Reddit, okay? I'm not going to say who it is, and it didn't have viral exposure, but it was very interesting because it said, "Are we not tired of same old names running over and over again?" I missed 2010 when now Secretary of Defense Gilbert Chodoro was running. Maybe he could run again. This is just a random post from a random guy on a random platform on a random Saturday evening. To me, that was because it tells me there's a long time from now until the next election. A lot of things can happen. And then maybe there's appetite in the Philippine population for a different leader. Maybe even a Democrat, maybe someone who is not so known in terms of their political activities. Maybe someone who genuinely wants to see work. But if, truth be told, let's see what happens. But what I'm saying is it's far from a done deal, at least for what I'm seeing in the monitoring. And maybe to answer Eric's question on preference for 40 years ago, let's say best practice on maybe how to deal with this. Maybe when we click a post, and you don't know if it's real, you're not sure if it's fake or real, you take 30 seconds of your time each day and you look at where this post comes from. Is this a real account? Was this established 30 seconds ago, one day, 3 months ago? And find out if this is someone that you really want to listen to. Is this someone worth your mental health? Is this someone worth giving up and expressing about? And does it reflect the realities that you think might be normal? Siguro po sa grado para sa Pilipinas. Bago po natin sulitin yung malakihan sa telepono, maganda rin tingnan natin kung fake news ba ito? Hindi mo makapaniwalaan, yung litrato ba, hindi AI ba ito, makakatakin ba ito? So, siguro po, ganun na password for me. So, maraming salamat po sa pagkakas. Thank you.
From my end, siguro, I already mentioned in terms of sa reform directions, I think that we clear on that. But siguro as a message is for government with flexibility and to to be able to adjust accordingly. I think it's important that the policies should be able to be to establish a strong foundation of monitoring and supervision. Yun yung ano kasi natin, I think that should be not effective should be we implement this regardless of idea but unless you are to adjust term or adjust the early phase of implementation, unless you are able to establish a foundation of monitoring or in implementation oversight of these policies. I think there are our considerations one was the impact of policy implementation. And nakikita natin dito during yung problems natin on infrastructure spending, on program of operations, on emerging policies, very rigid yung policies natin, and there's not enough flexibility for us to adjust because walang way able to track whether tama ba yung direction pinatahak natin. Of course, there are both external and internal factors that will be able to impact on these policies. So, of course, it's very essential for implementation to have very effective policy so that this ability to adjust policies will be able to adapt in due time, in make corrections so that you'll be able to provide implementation of policy. Already, the policy vetted politically, and then look at policies like siguro ang kulang talaga is yung monitoring and evaluation. That's something that government has been going through this in terms of really developing a culture of monitoring and evaluation in government is something that really have to seriously consider and seriously pursue. I think that's the message that I want to put across.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. I think at this point of our history as an I think we have to go on. Number one is that we have to relate to actually governance. So if we go back to the basics of governance, we have principles of good governance. We have number one is participatory governance. Second is the rule of law, particularly in addressing corruption. Third is accessibility, or what we call as part, what we call as another principle is accountability. Okay? Accountability and transparency. If all of these principles are followed by our leaders, our people here, I think we can go forward as a leader. This principle should be applied in all aspects of governance, especially, of course, especially in the case of public digital management, as Lorena said, from agent proclamation to
budget authorization or enactment to be up to the execution. Okay? The execution should be concentrated on the procurement reform. Otherwise, we will have a lot of problems regarding cost projects and substandard projects and so on. So I think this is one of the areas that really need to be addressed by the government. And transparency. Transparency is just to inform people what is doing and what government is doing. As they say, that a well-informed citizen will be had a better chance in choosing their leaders for the future.
Thank you, Sir Colin. Very briefly, again, it's a performance thing. Whether we're looking at the economic side of it or the political side of it, at the end of the day, it's a question of who is performing well. So pagka natin sa issue ng performance, it's a question of choosing the right tool, choosing the right instrument. So parang sinabi mo, na kapag pupunta ka sa rough road, tapos ang kinuha mo kay sila, talagang mamumulong ka. So kailangan mo ng po. Ngayon, kung ang pinag-uusapan natin ay highway at speed ang pinag-uusapan natin, then definitely we're looking at sila more than before. What I'm trying to say is, when we elect the president or a member of Congress, or the senator for that matter, we should know what their performance, what kind of performance is expected. Kung ang kailangan pala natin yung maa-apply o nag-work tayo ng DB at doon na lang natin yung mga perform na sumasayaw at kumakanta. Pero kung ang kailangan natin ay mag-perform, makakaalam kung paano yung gobyerno, ang piliin natin yung tama, yung merong preparasyon at merong pinag-aalan para makapag-perform sa gobyerno. Kasi yung sinasabi natin na pagkaroon tayo ng tawag ito, masanay tayo sa monitoring, sa evaluation, and so on, iyan ay puro performance. So, paano ba makakaasa yung mag-monitor, yung mag-i-implement ng batas na ginawa, yung mag-i-implement tama, kung yung kinuha mo na mag-i-implement, hindi na mo nakakaintindi. Kung hindi ang mag-endorse ka sa mga. So, siguro dapat hindi na popular yung pinag-uusapan natin kung hindi ko ulit ang magpapagay sa kapag nila, ang nasa loob nila, at pag-alaman ng natin ito kung sisimulan natin kanilang pinag-uusapan. Sisimulan natin background, sisimulan natin sa kanilang pinag-uusapan. Ilang magandang sa pag-suporta at buod sa presentation.
Thank you so much for our research persons, to Nicole, to Sir Ruben, to Prof. Ed. And salamat po sa pagsasabi sa amin ngayong Lunes ng umaga. And this has been the best years in Town Hall Episode 100. Magsasama po tayo ng mas matagal, 200, 300, 500, sana wala po kami 1,000. Pero, hindi po, mas eksplosibo at mas matinding mga usapan po ang aming pinapangako sa mga susunod na ito. For now, have a blessed Monday to all of you and we'll see you again next Sunday. Salamat po.
Matagal naman ng panahon, nakapwesto't nakapaglagay ng muhon. Pag-aari mo na politika mula pa noon, baka sakaling konting puwang magkaroon.
Napag-iwanan na tayo, naiiwan palalo. Wala nang pag-asa tao na tira na lamang ang puso.
Baka sakali maisip mo ayusin sistema natin, baguhin ang kinabukasan, planuhin gumanda ang bukas natin.
Ganun pa din naman, kasama ka pa din malamang. Paiba lang mawala ang harang, mas maraming magaling masalang.
Kailangan din may pananagutan, hindi kam-kam lang ng kam-kam. Mamamayan nalilimutan, mugmug na lang pinagtsatsagaan.
Baka sakali mapagbigyan, ayusin sistema ng bayan. Ikaw din naman makikinabang, magiging Pilipino maipagyayabang.
Baka sakali maisip mo ayusin sistema natin, baguhin ang kinabukasan, planuhin gumanda ang bukas natin.
Ganun pa din naman, kasama ka pa din malamang. May balang mawala ang harang.
Ganun pa din mapagbigyan,
ayusin sistema ng bayan.
ikaw din naman ang makikinabang.
Pagiging Pilipino maipagyayabang.